The moment Darnell pulled me aside, I knew something was wrong. Not phone is broken wrong, not even bad news wrong. His face was the color of old concrete, and his hands that had steadied a soldering iron for 15 years, were trembling so badly he almost dropped the device twice before he pressed it into my palms. He leaned close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath and whispered 6 words that rearranged every single thing I understood about my life. "Marcus," he said, "you need to get out." I had walked into that shop 12 minutes earlier carrying my wife's shattered phone wrapped in a dish towel. I walked out carrying the end of everything I thought I knew. "I'm going to tell you what happened. All of it. And I want you to stay with me until the end. Because I promise you the truth that came out of that Tuesday morning in Atlanta is not the truth you're expecting." Her name was Janelle, my wife of 11 years, the woman I had loved since we were both 26 and I'd spilled an entire Sweetwater IPA on her jacket at a show on Edgewood Avenue. She was brilliant and funny, and she grew tomatoes on our back deck, and she sang off-key to every Outkast song she'd ever heard. And she made the best jerk chicken in DeKalb County, and I would have bet everything I owned that I knew her completely, without reservation. I would have lost that bet. It started, or I should say I discovered it started on a Wednesday in November when Janelle dropped her phone coming down our stairs. The screen shattered into a spiderweb of cracks, so fine it looked almost decorative. It wouldn't power on. She had a client presentation that Friday, and her entire calendar, all her contacts, 3 months of files, everything was locked inside that broken rectangle of glass. "Can you take it to Darnell?" she asked, pressing it into my hands like it was something fragile and precious. "You know, I trust him." I did know that. We both did. Darnell Hicks had run a small electronics repair shop on Glenwood Avenue for going on 15 years. He'd fixed our laptop after the power surge of 2019. He'd come to our housewarming, our New Year's parties, our anniversary dinner when half the guests couldn't make it, and we were embarrassed about the empty seats at the table. He was the kind of friend you didn't have to earn. He was just there, steady and reliable, the way the neighborhood water tower was there, always in the background, always useful, always trusted. I dropped the phone off at 10:30 in the morning and walked next door to get breakfast at the diner, where the grits never change and the coffee is always slightly too hot. I read the AJC. I checked my emails. I watched the traffic on Glenwood shuffle past and thought about nothing in particular because I had nothing particular to worry about. I was still thinking about nothing when I pushed back through the door of Darnell's shop an hour later. That was when I saw his face. He wasn't behind the counter. He was standing in the middle of the room, holding Janelle's phone against his chest, like he was trying to keep something inside it from escaping. The fluorescent light overhead was casting strange shadows under his eyes, and his jaw was set in a way I'd never seen before, tight and deliberate, like a man holding a scream behind his teeth. The little bell above the door chimed when I came in, and he flinched. "Marcus." His voice came out strange, flattened somehow. "Close the door." I closed it. "Darnell, what's wrong? Is the phone too far gone?" He shook his head. He walked past me and flipped the small placard in the window from open to closed. That alone made my stomach drop 6 inches. "It turned on fine," he said. "Internal components were intact, just the screen needed replacing. I put a temporary glass on it so you could use it while you wait for the new one to come in." He paused. He was looking at the phone in his hands and not at me. When I powered it up to run the diagnostic test, the messages started coming through. "Okay," I said slowly. "Marcus." He finally looked at me, and the expression on his face, I still can't fully describe it. It was somewhere between grief and terror, like a man standing at the edge of something he wishes he hadn't seen. "I think you need to take this phone somewhere safe, look at what's on it, and then decide what you're going to do. I also think, and I'm saying this as someone who has known you and Janelle for 11 years, I think you need to be very, very careful about who you trust right now." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He handed me the phone with both hands, the way you hand someone a verdict. "Look at the text. The thread with the contact saved as RW. Honestly, I want to stop right here for a second, because I know what it feels like to hold something in your hands and know before you even look at it that looking at it is going to change your life. I've talked to people who had that feeling with a medical test result, a letter from an attorney, a voicemail they almost didn't check. There's a moment just before the information reaches you where the world is still intact. And then it isn't. I looked at the phone. The thread with RW was the most recent conversation. The last message had come in at 8:17 that morning, while Janelle was at her desk at home with a cup of coffee, and I was in the shower getting ready to drive to Darnell's shop. Subject is maintaining normal patterns. No signs of awareness. Timeline still viable. Recommend holding position for another 10 to 14 days. I read it twice, then I scrolled up. His behavior has been consistent. No irregular inquiries, no signs of suspicion. He trusts completely. That makes this harder in some ways, but it's necessary. I understand. Stay on course. The organization needs this completed cleanly. I know. Sometimes I wonder if there was another way. There wasn't. There never was. You knew the parameters when you accepted this. I'll hold until the window opens. My hands went cold. Not numb cold, the way metal goes cold in winter. I was reading about myself. I understood that with absolute certainty, even though my name appeared nowhere in the thread. He trusts completely. 11 years of marriage, and apparently my complete, unconditional trust was a tactical asset. A vulnerability to be exploited on a timeline. I think most people, in that moment, would have called their spouse immediately, confronted them, demanded an explanation. I know that's what I wanted to do. My thumb actually moved toward the phone icon before I stopped myself. Instead, I kept scrolling. The thread went back months. I'm not going to share all of it, but there were references to my daily routes. My gym scheduled Tuesdays and Fridays at the LA Fitness on Candler Road. The coffee shop where I did remote work on Thursday mornings. The fact that I always took I-20 rather than surface streets because I hated the lights on Memorial Drive. Whoever RW was, they had a detailed map of my existence, and Janelle had drawn it for them. Keep going to the photo album, Darnell said quietly. I did. She had photographs of me that I had never seen. Not the smiling pictures from vacations or the blurry ones from our kitchen at 2 a.m. when we were both sleep-deprived and making popcorn and laughing at something that wasn't really funny. These were surveillance photographs. Me leaving the house at 7:15. Me at the Kroger on Moreland Avenue. Me sitting outside the coffee shop with my laptop, completely unaware that I was being framed in someone's viewfinder. Me at my office building downtown, taken from across the street. Dozens of them, clinical, methodical, invisible to me. I set the phone down on Darnell's counter. I put both palms flat on the glass display case and looked at my own reflection in it and tried to remember how to breathe. Marcus. Darnell's hand came down on my shoulder. I meant what I said. Whatever this is, it's not small. The way they're talking, the organization, the timeline, completing things cleanly, that's not an affair. That's not even a scam. That's something else. He said it so carefully, and I will always love him for the care he took in that moment, that I recognized the shape of what he was trying to tell me without him having to say it directly. Someone had sent my wife to be married to me. I drove home on autopilot. Janelle was in the kitchen when I walked in. I could hear the rhythm of her chopping vegetables, the faint hum of whatever playlist she had going, the smell of garlic and onion in a hot pan. Every single detail of a Tuesday afternoon I had experienced hundreds of times before. I went upstairs. I told her the phone needed an extra day for the part to come in, which wasn't even close to the lie I was about to have to start telling. That night, I waited until her breathing went slow and even. Then I got up, and I went through her things for the first time in 11 years. I found the passport in her bedside drawer, tucked inside a hollowed-out copy of a novel she'd had since college. The cover was familiar, the passport was not. It had her face. It had a different name. Destiny Renee Caldwell, age 34, issued in Baltimore 3 years ago. My wife was 37. Destiny Renee Caldwell was 34. I photographed it with my phone and put it back exactly as I'd found it. My hands so unsteady I had to retake the photo twice. In the back of her closet, behind a box of winter sweaters, I found a black nylon bag. Inside, cash. I counted $18,000 in banded 50s and a second cell phone, older, a prepaid model. The lock screen showed 2 missed calls from a contact labeled simply coordinator. I put everything back. I returned to bed. I lay on my back in the dark and listened to my wife sleep beside me and tried to locate inside myself the man who had kissed her goodbye that morning without a single thought in his head except what he wanted for breakfast. That man was gone. He had been gone, I was starting to understand, for quite some time. He just hadn't known it yet. The next 3 days, I became someone I didn't recognize. I called in sick to my project management job. I drove to the address listed on Janelle's company ID. She'd told me for years she was a contracts administrator for a logistics company in Midtown. The building existed. The suite existed. The company listed on that suite's directory was not her company. It was an insurance brokerage. Had been for over a decade, according to the building supervisor, a quiet older man named Gerald who looked at her company ID with the same mild bewilderment I was feeling. Never heard of them, he said. And I've been in this building longer than most of the tenants. I sat in my car in that parking deck for 20 minutes. Then I followed her. The next morning, I left the house 30 minutes before she did, parked 2 streets over, and waited. At 8:10, her dark blue Camry pulled out of our driveway. I followed her across town past Little 5 Points, past Ponce, all the way to a glassy office complex in Buckhead that I'd driven past 100 times without ever stopping. She walked inside with the same purposeful confidence she'd always had, carrying her tote bag, wearing the gray blazer I'd given her for her birthday 2 years ago. I watched the entrance for 4 hours from the coffee shop across the street. She didn't come out. That evening, she made pasta and asked about my day and laughed at a story I told about a meeting that hadn't gone well. And she looked at me with the same warm, familiar eyes she'd always had. And somewhere behind those eyes was a woman named Destiny Renee Caldwell, who had been documenting my gym schedule for an organization I knew nothing about. I don't think I've ever felt more alone in a room with another person. The breakthrough came on a Thursday. I had gone back to the Buckhead building, this time on foot, to actually go inside when I saw Janelle emerge from a side entrance with a young woman who moved like someone trying to take up as little space as possible. Early 20s, possibly. Dark circles under her eyes. She was carrying a single bag, not a rolling suitcase, just a tote. The kind of bag you grab when you have to leave quickly and can't think about what to pack. Janelle had her arm around the young woman's shoulders and was speaking quietly close to her ear. There was something in the way Janelle was standing protective, steady, leaning slightly toward the younger woman like a physical shield that stopped me on the sidewalk. It didn't look like surveillance. It looked like the opposite of surveillance. It looked like someone being kept safe. I followed them to a quiet apartment complex off Ponce de Leon, watched Janelle help her inside a second-floor unit. 20 minutes later, Janelle came back downstairs alone. I waited until her car disappeared. Then I went upstairs and knocked. The young woman who answered kept the chain on. Her name, she eventually told me, was Priya. She was 23. She had come from a situation, she used that word carefully, situation that had been going on for 2 years. Her ex-boyfriend was a police officer in Gwinnett County. Every time she tried to leave, every time she filed something, it disappeared. Every restraining order, every complaint, his colleagues were covering for him, and she had spent the last 6 months trying to figure out how to become someone he couldn't find. Janelle had found her first. She said she works with a network, Priya told me, sitting on the edge of the bare mattress in that sparse apartment, holding a mug of tea with both hands. They help women like me get out when the system won't help. New documents, new addresses, people who can get you somewhere safe. She paused. She said she'd been doing this for 8 years. I sat with that for a moment. Does she ever talk about anyone called RW? I asked carefully. Priya thought about it. She mentioned someone called Roe once. I think that's a handler, someone who coordinates the logistics, documents, safe houses. She said he used to work federal law enforcement before he left to start this. I showed her the screenshots from the phone, the timeline texts, the language about subjects and surveillance and completing things cleanly. Priya read them twice. Her expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Oh," she said. "Oh no, you misread these." She turned the phone toward me and pointed at the word subject. "That's not you," she said quietly. "That's the abuser. They track the abusers to make sure the women they've helped are still safe, to document if someone is closing in on a new location." Her voice was very gentle. "Your wife isn't surveilling you, mister. Marcus. Marcus. She's been protecting you. If she's been documenting your routines, it's because she knows that sometimes the people who come after the women she helps will go after the people close to her first. She's been watching for signs that you were being watched." The room tilted. Everything I had spent 4 days being terrified of, the careful texts, the surveillance photos, the cold organizational language, it was still real. It had all happened exactly the way I'd understood it. But the meaning of every single piece of it was wrong. I had read every word of a love letter and concluded it was a threat. I drove home and sat in the driveway for a long time. That night, Janelle came and found me on the back deck. I was sitting in the dark with a glass of bourbon I hadn't touched, looking at the skyline glow over the tree line, and she stood in the doorway for a moment before she came and sat next to me. I think she knew. Whatever I was carrying on my face, she could see the shape of it. "I need to tell you something," I said. She was quiet for a second. "How much do you know?" "Enough," I said. "I think I know enough that you should probably start from the beginning." She looked out at the dark yard. She was quiet for so long that I thought she might not speak at all, and then she did. Her name was not Janelle Cooper. It had been once her given name, the one her mother used, the one on her college diploma, the one that had existed cleanly and without complication until the night a federal operation she'd spent 2 years building went sideways in Portland, Oregon, and the people she'd been working to bring down learned her real identity. She had been a federal agent. Specifically, she had worked financial crimes with a task force targeting labor trafficking networks operations that recruited vulnerable women from abroad with promises of legitimate work and then held them in debt bondage. The network she'd infiltrated had connections from Portland to Atlanta to Miami. She had been, she told me, 3 weeks from a clean takedown when someone in the department talked. The man at the top of the network, a man named Ariel Sousa, Brazilian national, operating out of a legitimate import business in Buckhead, which was, I realized with a cold shiver, the very building I'd been watching for 2 days, had people inside federal law enforcement. When he found out about the agent who'd spent 2 years working toward him, he put a price on her head, not a metaphorical one. The Justice Department offered her a straight relocation. Rural Nebraska, new name, done. She refused. Not because she was reckless, she told me this with such careful precision that I understood she'd made this choice slowly and with full knowledge of what it meant, but because she had spent 2 years watching what Sousa's network did to women who had trusted it, and she could not walk away from that work and live with herself. So she became Janelle Cooper. Atlanta cover, stable marriage, quiet neighborhood, nothing about her life designed to attract attention. Our marriage, at the beginning, was an assignment. I want to be honest with you about how I felt when she said that, because the way I tell this next part matters, and I want to tell it truthfully. I felt not anger, exactly. Something older than anger, something that went down into the bone. 11 years of mornings and arguments and anniversaries, and the way she'd sat with me for 3 days straight when my father was dying in the hospital, all of it had been real to me. Every moment of it had been real. And now I was learning that it had begun as a transaction, a tactical decision made in a conference room by people who needed a credible cover story. She was watching me absorb this. Her eyes were steady, but her hands were pressed flat against her thighs. At first, she said, it was an assignment at first. They needed someone stable, predictable, good cover. You checked every box. She paused. And then you spilled beer on me at that show on Edgewood, and you apologized for 7 straight minutes and offered to replace my jacket, and then looked so horrified when I laughed that I thought, she stopped. I thought, this is a real person, and I kept thinking it. And somewhere in the first year, it stopped being an assignment, and I didn't know what to do with that, because the more real it became, the more dangerous it became for you. The longer she kept me in the dark, the safer I was. The longer she let me love her without knowing who she really was, the less likely I was to accidentally tell someone something, to mention her real name, to behave in a way that could be traced. She had been protecting me by lying to me. And she had been lying to me because she loved me. I sat with that for a very long time. Why now? I asked finally. Why are you telling me now? Her expression shifted. The steadiness cracked slightly at the edges. Because 3 days ago, Ro, my handler, got intelligence that Sousa's people have identified the Buckhead operation. They don't know my current identity yet, but they know someone has been working against them from Atlanta for years, and they are narrowing it down. She looked at me directly. And because I found out tonight that they've been watching our house, I didn't sleep that night, not a minute of it. By morning, I had made a decision. I told Janelle over coffee her real name was Adeze Obi. She'd grown up in Silver Spring, Maryland, and her mother still called her Ada, and she'd been afraid to tell me that for 11 years I told her I wasn't going to run. Marcus, she said, you're an operations manager for a logistics firm. I know financial systems, I said, supply chains, compliance structures, import documentation. You said Sousa runs a legitimate import business as his cover. I looked at her across our kitchen table with the morning coming gray and cold through the windows. That's a paper trail. Everything he moves through that business is documented somewhere. I know how to find things in documents that people think are hidden. She was quiet for a long time. Ro is going to think this is insane, she said. What do you think? She looked at me the way she had looked at me that first night on Edgewood Avenue, when I was still covered in beer and mortification and she was laughing at me, like she was seeing something she hadn't expected. I think, she said slowly, that I have been fighting this war by myself for 8 years. And I think you are the only person I trust completely. And I think she stopped, steadied herself. I think yes. What came after that was the most frightening and most alive I have ever felt in my life. Roe, whose real name was Raymond Washington, retired federal marshal, a man who had lost his sister to a trafficking situation that the local police had ignored, coordinated the operation from a safe house in Decatur. Adieze provided 8 years of human intelligence, contacts, testimony. I spent 6 weeks going through Sousa's import documentation, with the kind of focus I had never applied to anything in my life, and found what she and Roe had never been positioned to find. A second set of financial transfers moving through 3 shell companies in Delaware, funds that could be traced directly to payments made to the Gwinnett County officers who'd been protecting the man who was hunting Priya. That was the thread that unraveled everything. I'm not going to tell you there was no danger. There were 2 days in that 6 weeks where we had to leave the house with 12 minutes notice and go to an address. Roe texted us on a rotating phone. I'm not going to tell you I was brave. I was terrified constantly. I called my brother at one point and couldn't explain to him where I was or why, and the way he sounded on the phone, confused and worried, nearly broke me. But Ariel Sousa was arrested on a Tuesday morning, 7 months after I had walked into Darnell's shop on Glenwood Avenue with a dish towel full of broken phone. 14 members of his network were arrested with him. The 2 Gwinnett County officers who'd been sheltering Priya's ex-boyfriend were arrested the same morning. I watched the news coverage from a hotel room in Savannah, with ADS sitting beside me, her hand in mine, the TV light blue and quiet in the early morning dark. She cried. She hadn't cried once during any of it, not during the safe house nights, not during the federal depositions, not during any of the long, high-stakes hours of the previous 7 months. But she cried that morning, sitting on the edge of a hotel bed in Savannah, and I held her and thought about how long she had been carrying this. We live in Charlotte now. New names on the paperwork, new city, same people. Adieze consults part-time with a federal task force that works trafficking cases across the Southeast. I do forensic financial work. It turns out that skill set is in high demand when you're trying to follow money through a network of shell companies, and I have gotten very, very good at it. Last month, we got a card in the mail from Priya, forwarded through Roe's address. She's in a graduate program now. She's okay, she wrote. In the card, I don't know if you'll ever understand what you gave me. I told Adize what she wrote and watched Ada fold the card and hold it against her chest and close her eyes. That's why we do this. That's the whole reason. I want to tell you one more thing, and then I'll let you go. Because I've been thinking about this a lot. In the Charlotte mornings when the light comes through a different set of windows and the coffee is a slightly different brand and everything in my life is different except the woman sitting across the table from me. The mistake most people make, and I made it completely, for 4 terrified days is to assume that a secret is the same thing as a lie. I thought I'd been lied to for 11 years. And in some technical sense, I had been. But what Adieze was actually doing for 11 years was carrying the weight of a truth so heavy it could have killed me if she'd put it down wrong. She wasn't keeping a secret to protect herself. She was keeping a secret to protect me. And the moment protecting me required telling me the truth, she told it. That distinction took me months to fully understand. Maybe I'm still understanding it. If you've ever loved someone who kept something from you, I want to ask you one question. What was the weight they were carrying? Not what they hid, but what keeping it cost them. Before you go, I want to hear from you. If you were in my position, would you have done what I did? Comment 1 if you would have run, 2 if you would have confronted her immediately, 3 if you would have stayed and fought alongside her. I want to know your thinking. And tell me, where are you watching from right now? What time is it there? This story has found people in places I never expected, and every time I see a new city in the comments, I am genuinely moved by it. If you've ever had a moment where something you thought you knew turned out to mean something completely different, I'd love to know your story. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe. I share stories about real human complexity, love that doesn't look like love, courage that doesn't look like courage, and the people who carry secrets that are heavier than anyone around them understands. I'm grateful you were here for this one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Atlanta, Georgia, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people, living or dead, or actual events is entirely coincidental.